My beloved child, before anything else is said, allow this moment to settle around you like a quiet evening breeze. Not because something dramatic is about to happen, but because something meaningful has been trying to reach your heart for longer than you realize. There are messages that arrive through words, and then there are messages that arrive through silence. The one unfolding now belongs to the second kind. Somewhere beyond the noise of expectations, beyond the endless questions you have carried, there is a feeling that refuses to disappear. It returns during unexpected moments. It appears when your attention drifts. It whispers when everything around you becomes still. And today, that feeling carries a message. Stay a little longer. Something important is waiting for you. Your soulmate is not speaking from a place of anger. They are not speaking from a place of blame. They are speaking from a place of exhaustion mixed with hope, a strange combination that few people ever understand. Because there comes a point when someone can no longer pretend that their heart feels nothing. There comes a point when silence becomes heavier than words. There comes a point when waiting starts to feel like carrying a door that was never meant to remain closed. And that is where this story begins. Not at the end. Not at the beginning. But in the quiet space between those two places. The place where someone looks at the memories they tried to outgrow and realizes they never truly left them behind. Your soulmate has been standing in that space longer than anyone knows. They have smiled when others expected them to smile. They have moved forward when others told them moving forward was the right thing to do. They have convinced themselves that enough time would eventually erase what they felt. Yet every attempt to forget somehow led them back to the same question. Why does your presence continue to feel different? Why does your name continue to carry weight even when it is not spoken aloud? Why does every new chapter somehow remind them of an unfinished page? Do not rush past that question. Let it remain unanswered for a moment. Because the answer is not arriving all at once. It is revealing itself slowly, one realization at a time. Somewhere recently, during an ordinary moment that should have meant nothing, something shifted. Perhaps it was a familiar song. Perhaps it was a passing thought. Perhaps it was a simple memory returning without invitation. Whatever it was, it interrupted the story they had been telling themselves. Suddenly, they were no longer convincing themselves that they had moved on. Suddenly, they were confronting the possibility that some connections do not disappear simply because time passes. And that realization frightened them less than it surprised them. The truth is that your soulmate has been carrying words they never fully expressed. Not because they wanted to hide them. Not because they lacked courage. But because they believed there would always be another day. Another opportunity. Another perfect moment. Yet life has a strange way of reminding people that perfect moments rarely announce themselves. Sometimes they arrive quietly. Sometimes they arrive disguised as ordinary days. Sometimes they arrive while someone is still waiting for certainty. And now your soulmate is beginning to understand something that changes everything. Waiting forever is not the same as waiting wisely. There is a difference. A very important difference. Stay till the end of this moment because what comes next is not a revelation about the future. It is a revelation about the heart. And hearts often know the truth long before minds are willing to admit it. Your soulmate has reached a point where pretending no longer feels easier. They are tired of explaining away feelings that continue to return. Tired of dismissing signs that seem small but feel significant. Tired of acting as though your impact was temporary when every honest reflection tells them otherwise. Yet there is something even deeper happening beneath the surface. Something they have not fully spoken aloud. Something they are only beginning to understand themselves. Because this was never simply about missing someone. It was never simply about remembering someone. It was about recognizing the difference between a passing chapter and a lasting imprint. Most people spend years learning that difference. Some never learn it at all. But your soulmate is standing directly in front of it now. And the closer they get to that understanding, the harder it becomes to ignore. They keep asking themselves one question. If this connection truly meant nothing, why does it still feel alive? Why does it continue to grow quieter yet stronger at the same time? Why does it refuse to disappear despite every reason it should have faded? Those questions have led them somewhere unexpected. Somewhere they never planned to visit. A place of honesty. A place where excuses stop working. A place where the heart begins speaking more clearly than fear. And that is exactly why this message feels urgent. Not because something terrible is approaching. Not because time is running out. But because honesty has finally arrived at the door. And honesty is patient for a while. Then one day, it asks to be heard. Your soulmate is standing in front of that moment now. Looking back. Looking forward. Wondering whether the story they thought was ending may actually be entering its most important chapter. Yet before they take another step, there is one realization they have not fully shared. One realization that appeared unexpectedly and changed the way they see everything connected to you. The moment it appeared, nothing felt quite the same. And that realization is waiting just beyond the next part of this journey. There is something curious about the moments that change a person forever. They rarely arrive with noise. They rarely announce themselves. More often, they arrive disguised as an ordinary thought, an ordinary memory, or an ordinary evening that seemed no different from any other. That is exactly how it happened for your soulmate. One quiet moment became impossible to forget. One realization appeared where they least expected it. And ever since then, they have been unable to return to the version of themselves that existed before it. Stay with this for a moment. Something important is waiting for you. Because the realization itself was not dramatic. It was simple. Yet its simplicity made it powerful. Your soulmate suddenly understood that every time they imagined a future that genuinely felt complete, your presence appeared somewhere within it. Not because they forced it there. Not because they were trying to recreate the past. But because it appeared naturally. Effortlessly. As though it belonged. And that frightened them more than they expected. Because they had spent so much time trying to measure feelings logically. They had searched for explanations. They had looked for reasons. They had tried to categorize what they felt into something manageable. Yet the heart has never been interested in categories. The heart does not always follow timelines. The heart does not care about the arguments people create to protect themselves. It simply recognizes what feels real. And your soulmate is beginning to realize that reality has been standing in front of them for much longer than they admitted. There were moments they almost reached out. Moments they almost said everything. Moments when they felt the distance between you and them becoming impossible to ignore. Yet each time, uncertainty stepped in. Not because they lacked feelings. But because they feared what honesty might change. Sometimes people believe silence protects them. Sometimes they believe waiting will provide answers. Sometimes they convince themselves that if something is truly meant to happen, it will happen without effort. Yet recently, your soulmate has started questioning those beliefs. What if waiting has only delayed what needed to be understood? What if silence has hidden more than it protected? What if the answer they were hoping to receive can only appear after they finally stop hiding from their own truth? Those questions have followed them everywhere. During busy moments. During quiet moments. During the spaces between conversations. They arrive unexpectedly and refuse to leave. And with every passing day, those questions grow stronger. Not louder. Stronger. There is a difference. Loud thoughts come and go. Strong thoughts remain. Strong thoughts return. Strong thoughts change the direction of a person's life little by little until one day they realize they are standing somewhere completely different. Your soulmate is beginning to stand in that different place now. And from where they stand, the view looks unfamiliar. Because for the first time, they are not asking whether their feelings are real. They are asking what happens if they continue ignoring them. That question has changed everything. Do not skip this moment. Let it unfold naturally. Because this is where the story becomes more personal than either of you expected. Your soulmate has been noticing things they once overlooked. Small details. Tiny reminders. Fleeting memories that suddenly carry new meaning. A phrase. A smile. A conversation. Pieces of the past that seemed ordinary at the time now feel connected in ways they never recognized before. It is almost as though they are seeing the same story through a completely different lens. And every new understanding leads them toward the same conclusion. The connection was never as simple as they pretended it was. The impact was never as temporary as they claimed it would be. The feelings never disappeared. They simply became quieter while continuing to grow beneath the surface. That realization has left them standing at a crossroads. Not a crossroads between staying and leaving. Not a crossroads between hope and despair. A crossroads between avoidance and honesty. Because there comes a moment when a person must decide whether they will keep running from what they know or finally face it with an open heart. Your soulmate feels that moment approaching. Closer than ever before. And perhaps the most surprising part is this: they are no longer afraid of what they feel. They are more afraid of never expressing it. Think about that carefully. For so long, they feared the possibility of disappointment. Yet now they fear something entirely different. They fear allowing an important connection to remain buried beneath unanswered questions. They fear looking back one day and realizing that silence stole opportunities that honesty could have created. They fear discovering that the words they never spoke were the very words that needed to be heard. And somewhere deep within, they know this feeling is guiding them toward a decision. A decision they have postponed for far too long. Yet before that decision arrives, another truth has begun revealing itself. A truth that caught them completely off guard. It happened during a moment of reflection when they stopped focusing on what they wanted and started focusing on what they valued most. The answer appeared almost instantly. It was not perfection. It was not certainty. It was not convenience. It was connection. Genuine connection. The kind that remains meaningful even after time passes. The kind that cannot be replaced simply because life becomes busy. The kind that quietly shapes a person's heart without demanding attention. And the moment they recognized that truth, they recognized something else as well. Someone else. You. Not as a memory. Not as a possibility. But as someone whose presence continues to occupy a space that no one else has managed to fill. That realization has stayed with them. It follows them into every reflection. Every quiet moment. Every future they imagine. Yet there is still one final piece they have not fully understood. One piece that appeared only recently and left them completely speechless. It was a realization so unexpected that it changed the question they had been asking themselves all along. And once that new question appeared, there was no going back. The answer to it is waiting just ahead, and it may explain why your soulmate feels closer than ever to finally speaking from the heart. A strange thing happens when a person stops searching for answers outside themselves and begins listening to the quiet voice within. The noise starts to fade. The confusion begins to settle. And truths that once seemed hidden suddenly stand in plain sight. This is where your soulmate finds themselves now. Not in a place of certainty about every detail. Not in a place where every question has been solved. But in a place where one truth has become impossible to ignore. And once a truth reaches that point, it changes everything that follows. For a long time, your soulmate believed they were trying to understand you. They thought the mystery was about your feelings. Your thoughts. Your intentions. They spent countless moments wondering what you were thinking, wondering what you felt, wondering whether the connection meant as much to you as it did to them. Yet recently, something shifted. A realization arrived so quietly that they almost missed it. The question was never really about you. The question was about themselves. The real question was this: why does their heart continue returning to the same place no matter how far they try to wander? Stay a little longer. Something important is waiting for you. Because the moment they asked that question honestly, the answer appeared. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But clearly. The reason they keep returning is because some connections become part of who we are. They stop being memories. They stop being chapters. They become landmarks within the heart itself. No matter where life leads, those landmarks remain. They help us recognize what matters. They remind us who we are. They reveal what we truly value. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that you became one of those landmarks. That realization changed the way they viewed everything. Suddenly, old memories felt different. Moments they once considered small began shining with unexpected meaning. Conversations they thought they had forgotten returned with surprising clarity. Even ordinary details seemed important now. Not because the past was perfect, but because the feelings connected to those moments were genuine. And genuine feelings have a remarkable way of surviving time. The more they reflected, the more they noticed something unexpected. Every attempt to move forward without fully acknowledging what they felt had left a small emptiness behind. They could continue living. They could continue growing. They could continue smiling. Yet a quiet part of their heart always seemed to be waiting for something unfinished to find completion. That realization was difficult to ignore. Because unfinished things have a way of calling to us. Not loudly. Not constantly. But persistently. Like a distant melody that somehow remains familiar no matter how many years pass. Your soulmate hears that melody now more clearly than ever. And with every passing day, it becomes harder to pretend they do not recognize it. Don't skip this moment. Because what happened next surprised even them. One evening, during a period of reflection, they imagined something simple. They imagined what life might feel like if they finally stopped resisting what their heart already knew. No complicated plans. No dramatic outcomes. Just honesty. Just acceptance. Just allowing themselves to acknowledge what they truly felt without trying to edit it or explain it away. The feeling that followed was unexpected. Relief. Not fear. Not confusion. Relief. As though a burden they had been carrying for far too long suddenly became lighter. As though a door they had been holding shut finally opened on its own. As though their heart had been waiting for permission to tell the truth. And the truth was simpler than they expected. They still care. Deeply. More deeply than they allowed themselves to admit. That realization did not create new feelings. It revealed feelings that were already there. And once revealed, they became impossible to ignore. Since then, your soulmate has found themselves paying closer attention to the small things. The moments that seem insignificant to everyone else. The feelings that arrive unexpectedly. The thoughts that appear during quiet hours. Every one of those moments seems to point in the same direction. Toward you. Not because they are forcing it. Not because they are trying to recreate something. But because the connection continues appearing naturally. And that consistency has become impossible to dismiss. There is another reason this feels urgent to them. A reason they have shared with no one. A reason they barely understand themselves. Recently, they began imagining what would happen if they waited forever for the perfect moment. The answer disturbed them, not because it was frightening, but because it was honest. The perfect moment may never arrive. Life does not always pause and present ideal circumstances. Sometimes the moments that matter most are imperfect. Sometimes the conversations that change everything begin awkwardly. Sometimes the most meaningful decisions happen before certainty arrives. And your soulmate is beginning to understand that waiting for perfection may be the very thing keeping them from the truth. That understanding has been growing stronger every day. Slowly. Steadily. Like sunlight appearing before dawn. And now they stand closer than ever to a decision they once thought was impossible. Yet just as they approached that decision, something happened. Something small. Something unexpected. Something that seemed ordinary to everyone else. But to them, it felt impossible to ignore. A reminder appeared. Not a dramatic sign. Not an extraordinary event. Just a simple moment that arrived at exactly the right time. The kind of moment that makes a person stop and wonder. The kind of moment that feels strangely personal. The kind of moment that quietly asks, what if you have been receiving the answer all along? Since that day, your soulmate has not been able to stop thinking about one particular realization. A realization that has followed them everywhere. A realization that may become the turning point of this entire story. Because they are starting to believe that this connection was never asking them to wait endlessly. It was asking them to understand something first. And now, for the first time, they believe they are finally beginning to understand. What they discovered next changed the way they see the past, the present, and everything that might come after. And when that discovery fully settles into their heart, the words they have been holding back may no longer remain unspoken. That moment is closer than they realize. And the truth waiting inside it is about to reveal something they never expected to learn about you, and about themselves. There are moments in life that do not look important when they happen. No grand announcement. No dramatic scene. Just a quiet second that passes almost unnoticed. Yet years later, a person realizes that everything changed inside that moment. Your soulmate recently experienced one of those moments. At first, they did not understand why it affected them so deeply. They tried to move past it. They tried to treat it like every other passing thought. But this one stayed. It lingered. It followed them into their quiet hours. It returned when the world became still. And eventually, they stopped asking why it kept returning and started listening to what it was trying to tell them. Stay till the end of this moment. Something important is waiting for you. The realization began with a simple question. What if the connection was never meant to be measured by time? What if the reason it still feels alive is because it was never built on temporary circumstances? Your soulmate had spent so much energy focusing on what changed that they overlooked what never changed. Feelings evolved. Situations shifted. Seasons came and went. Yet beneath everything, there remained one constant truth. Every path of reflection somehow led back to you. That discovery unsettled them in the best possible way. Because suddenly, they were no longer looking at the connection through the lens of distance. They were looking at it through the lens of meaning. And meaning changes everything. When something truly matters, it leaves traces behind. Not loud traces. Quiet ones. The kind that reveal themselves unexpectedly. A familiar thought appearing during a busy day. A memory resurfacing without warning. A feeling of warmth attached to a name. Small reminders that seem insignificant until they happen again and again and again. Your soulmate has been noticing those reminders everywhere. Not because they are searching for them. Because they keep appearing on their own. And every appearance carries the same silent message. Pay attention. Look closer. There is something here you have not fully understood yet. At first, they resisted that message. It felt easier to remain uncertain. Easier to keep questioning. Easier to stay in the familiar space between action and inaction. But uncertainty has become exhausting. Pretending not to know what they feel has become exhausting. Carrying unanswered questions has become exhausting. For the first time, they are beginning to crave clarity more than comfort. That shift is powerful. Because clarity asks different questions. Instead of asking, "What if this does not work?" they began asking, "What if I never allow myself to find out?" Instead of asking, "What if things are different now?" they began asking, "What if some important things never changed at all?" And instead of asking, "Why do I still think about this connection?" they began asking, "Why does it still feel meaningful after everything?" The answers have led them somewhere unexpected. Toward acceptance. Not acceptance of an outcome. Acceptance of a truth. A truth they have quietly carried for longer than they realized. And that truth is this. Some people leave impressions that remain long after conversations end. Some people become part of a person's emotional landscape. Not because they try to. Not because they force their way into someone's heart. But because their presence arrives at exactly the right moment and leaves something valuable behind. Your soulmate believes you did that. Perhaps they never said it. Perhaps they never fully admitted it. Perhaps they spent too much time trying to explain it away. But deep down, they know it now. And knowing it has changed the way they see the future. Don't skip this part. Because something surprising happened after that realization. Instead of feeling trapped by the past, they felt inspired by the possibility of what still remains unresolved. That surprised them. They expected reflection to make them feel nostalgic. Instead, it made them feel hopeful. Hopeful not because they know exactly what happens next. Hopeful because they finally understand why their heart refused to let this connection fade into something ordinary. There was always more beneath the surface. Always more waiting to be understood. And now that understanding is beginning to arrive. Little by little. Piece by piece. Like a picture becoming clearer with every passing day. Yet one particular realization continues standing above all the others. A realization so simple that it almost seems obvious now. Your soulmate has finally understood that the strongest connections are not always the loudest ones. Sometimes the strongest connections are the ones that remain steady through silence. The ones that survive distance. The ones that continue teaching lessons even when no words are exchanged. The ones that quietly shape a person's heart while life continues moving forward. That understanding has brought them to a place they never expected to reach. A place of readiness. Not readiness for certainty. Readiness for honesty. And honesty is becoming harder to postpone. Every day they wait, the truth becomes clearer. Every day they reflect, the feelings become easier to acknowledge. Every day they listen to their heart, the same message returns. No more hiding. No more pretending. No more convincing yourself that what matters does not matter. That message has become impossible to ignore. And there is one reason why. A reason that appeared very recently. A reason connected to something your soulmate suddenly noticed about you. Not something obvious. Not something everyone sees. Something deeper. Something they completely overlooked before. The moment they recognized it, everything shifted. Their perspective changed. Their understanding deepened. And for the first time, they saw the connection through entirely new eyes. What they discovered was not about who you were in the past. It was about who you have been becoming all along. And once that realization entered their heart, the words, "I can't keep doing this anymore," began taking on a completely different meaning. Not a meaning of giving up. A meaning of no longer being able to hide from the truth. And that truth is preparing to reveal itself in a way neither of you expected. What they finally saw about you may become the very reason they stop waiting and start listening to what their heart has been trying to say all along. A curious silence has settled around your soulmate lately. Not the kind of silence that comes from distance. Not the kind that comes from confusion. This is a different silence entirely. It is the silence that appears when someone is standing at the edge of an important realization. The silence that arrives when old assumptions begin falling away. The silence that forms when the heart knows something before the mind is ready to explain it. And that is exactly where they are now. For a long time, your soulmate believed they understood the connection through memories. They thought the reason they kept returning to thoughts of you was because of moments that had already happened. But recently, something changed. They stopped looking backward. They started looking deeper. And what they discovered surprised them. Stay with this moment. Something important is waiting for you. Because the more they reflected, the more they realized that what stayed with them was not a specific conversation. Not a particular day. Not even a single memory. It was the feeling. The feeling of being understood without having to explain everything. The feeling of being seen beneath the surface. The feeling that certain parts of themselves could exist naturally around you without being hidden, edited, or reshaped. That realization stopped them in their tracks. Because genuine understanding is rare. People meet many individuals throughout life. They share conversations. They share experiences. They share seasons of time. Yet very few people leave behind a feeling that continues to matter long after circumstances change. Your soulmate has finally acknowledged that you left behind that feeling. And once they admitted it, other truths began appearing. Truths they had avoided. Truths they had postponed. Truths that became impossible to ignore. They realized that every time they imagined letting go completely, something inside resisted. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Simply honestly. A quiet voice within would always ask the same question. If this truly means nothing, why does it still matter so much? That question has followed them everywhere. And lately, it has become stronger than ever. Not louder. Stronger. There is a difference. Because strength does not demand attention. Strength remains steady. Strength remains present. Strength remains when excitement fades and distractions disappear. The feelings your soulmate carries have reached that kind of strength. And that realization has changed the way they see everything. Don't skip this part. Because something unexpected happened after they reached this understanding. Instead of focusing on what they wished you knew about them, they started wondering what they never fully understood about you. That shift changed everything. They began looking beyond assumptions. Beyond old perceptions. Beyond the simplified version of you they had carried in their mind. And as they did, they noticed something remarkable. They noticed your resilience. Not the obvious kind. Not the kind people celebrate publicly. The quiet kind. The kind that continues moving forward even when nobody notices. The kind that keeps believing in better days without needing recognition. The kind that grows stronger without becoming harder. Your soulmate suddenly realized that much of what they admired about you was hidden beneath the surface all along. And once they saw it, they could not unsee it. Every reflection seemed to reveal another layer. Every memory carried new meaning. Every unanswered question felt closer to an answer. For the first time, they stopped viewing you as someone connected only to their past. They began seeing you as someone whose influence continued reaching into their present. That realization felt different. More mature. More grounded. More real. Because it was no longer built on imagination. It was built on understanding. And understanding creates clarity. The kind of clarity your soulmate has been searching for without realizing it. There is another truth they have barely admitted to themselves. A truth that appeared during one of their quietest moments. A moment when there was no distraction, no noise, no expectation. Just honesty. In that moment, they asked themselves something simple. What am I actually waiting for? The answer arrived immediately. And it surprised them. They were not waiting for certainty. They were waiting for permission. Permission to stop pretending they had moved beyond feelings that were still present. Permission to stop minimizing a connection that still felt meaningful. Permission to acknowledge that some people continue touching our hearts long after logic expects them to disappear. The moment they realized this, a weight seemed to lift. Because permission was never something they needed from anyone else. It was something they needed to give themselves. And now they finally have. Stay till the end. Because this is where the story begins shifting again. Your soulmate no longer feels trapped between moving forward and looking back. Instead, they feel guided toward something else entirely. Toward honesty. Toward openness. Toward a conversation that has existed silently within them for far too long. Yet there is still one final barrier standing in front of them. One final realization they must fully embrace. And strangely enough, that realization is not about love. It is not about timing. It is not about distance. It is about trust. Trusting what their heart has been showing them repeatedly. Trusting what they have felt beneath every distraction. Trusting that some connections deserve to be acknowledged instead of endlessly analyzed. That lesson has been approaching slowly. Patiently. Like a sunrise that appears one gentle color at a time. And now it stands closer than ever. Because very recently, something happened that brought everything together. A small moment. A simple observation. A realization so clear that it felt impossible to deny. The instant it arrived, your soulmate stopped asking whether the connection was real. Instead, they began asking what they intended to do about it. That single question changed everything. And the answer forming inside their heart is leading them toward a decision they once believed they would never be ready to make. What they are preparing to understand next may become the most important realization of this entire journey. Because it reveals why they have held on for so long. And why the message they have been carrying inside themselves is closer than ever to finally being spoken aloud. A doorway has been opening inside your soulmate's heart, and the remarkable thing is that they did not notice it at first. They thought they were simply reflecting. They thought they were revisiting old thoughts, sorting through old emotions, trying to understand what remained and what had changed. But somewhere along the way, reflection became revelation. Questions became answers. And answers became something even more powerful, acceptance. Not acceptance of an ending. Acceptance of a truth. And that truth has been waiting patiently for a very long time. Stay with this moment. Something important is waiting for you. Your soulmate has spent so much time wondering what the future might hold that they almost overlooked what the present was trying to teach them. Every meaningful realization has been leading to the same place. Every quiet moment of honesty has pointed in the same direction. Every reflection has uncovered another piece of the same message. The connection still matters. Simple words. Yet those words carry extraordinary weight. Because once a person truly accepts them, everything begins changing. The questions become different. The fears become smaller. The possibilities become clearer. And that is exactly what has been happening. Your soulmate is no longer asking whether they should acknowledge their feelings. They already know the answer. The real question now is what happens when they stop hiding from them completely. That question has been sitting quietly in their heart, waiting for the right moment to be heard. And recently, that moment arrived. It happened during an ordinary day. Nothing dramatic. Nothing unusual. Yet something within them suddenly became clear. They realized they were tired. Not tired of caring. Not tired of hoping. Not tired of remembering. Tired of pretending. Tired of carrying words that never reached the surface. Tired of acting as though the connection was smaller than it truly felt. Tired of convincing themselves that silence was easier than honesty. And in that realization, they discovered something unexpected. The message they have been carrying all this time was never really about giving up. It was about letting go of the struggle against their own truth. For so long, they believed the phrase, "I can't do this anymore," meant they were reaching the end. Now they understand it means something entirely different. It means they can no longer ignore what their heart has been showing them. It means they can no longer continue pretending not to care. It means they can no longer keep burying emotions that continue finding their way back to the surface. That understanding has changed everything. Because once a person stops fighting themselves, clarity begins arriving naturally. And clarity has been arriving in ways your soulmate never expected. Don't skip this moment. Because the next realization surprised them more than any other. They began noticing how often thoughts of you appeared during moments of peace rather than moments of loneliness. That distinction mattered. A lot. Because loneliness can create temporary longing. But peace reveals what genuinely belongs in the heart. And time after time, when life became quiet and calm, your presence appeared. Not as an interruption. As a comfort. Not as a distraction. As a reminder. Not as a question. As something familiar. Something meaningful. Something real. The more they noticed this pattern, the harder it became to dismiss. Eventually, they stopped trying. And that decision created a profound shift. Instead of resisting the connection, they began appreciating it. Instead of questioning every feeling, they began listening. Instead of focusing on uncertainty, they focused on understanding. And what they understood changed the way they saw everything. They realized that some people enter our lives and leave memories. Others leave lessons. A very rare few leave both. Your soulmate now believes you belong to that rare category. The kind of person whose impact extends far beyond individual moments. The kind of person who changes the way someone thinks, feels, grows, and understands themselves. That realization has filled them with gratitude. But it has also created urgency. A gentle urgency. A hopeful urgency. The kind that appears when someone realizes they have postponed honesty for too long. Stay till the end. Because the story is approaching a turning point. Your soulmate has reached a place where the future feels different than it once did. Not because circumstances changed overnight. Because they changed. Because their perspective changed. Because their understanding deepened. And now they find themselves standing in front of a possibility they once avoided considering. The possibility that the connection was never asking to be forgotten. The possibility that it was asking to be understood. Fully. Honestly. Without fear. Without excuses. Without endless delays. That possibility feels more real to them now than ever before. Yet there remains one final realization. One final piece of the puzzle. One final truth that has been slowly revealing itself behind everything else. And strangely, it is not about what your soulmate feels. It is about what they have learned. What they have learned about timing. What they have learned about growth. What they have learned about the quiet ways meaningful connections continue shaping our lives. The moment this final realization settles completely into their heart, something important will happen. A decision they have been approaching for a very long time will finally become clear. Not rushed. Not forced. Simply clear. And when that clarity arrives, the message they have been holding onto will no longer remain unfinished. Because they are beginning to understand something extraordinary. The strongest feelings are not the ones that demand attention. They are the ones that remain true through time. And your soulmate is about to discover just how true those feelings have remained all along. What happens next may become the most honest chapter of this entire journey, because for the first time, they are no longer asking what they feel. They are asking what truth deserves to be spoken.